Hi, thanks for joining me. This video, I'll be discussing a client who came to me on a procedural fairness letter that she received. In this procedural fairness letter, she was requested by the officer to explain why she indulged in misrepresentation, or at least she was charged with misrepresentation and she had 30 days to explain this charge. Procedural fairness letter is exactly that. Is a process for the officer to be fair to you, to say, I don't understand, or I'm leaning towards a no, so I'm going to be fair to you, and I'm going to give you X amount of days to respond to the concern I have. It's exactly what a procedural fairness is. Most of the times, an officer gives you 30 days. Sometimes, because the answer should be immediate and there's no documents required, they might give you 7 days. But if it requires documentation, the officer is usually kind enough to give 30 days. Sometimes the officer is also able to extend that. So if you don't have all your ducks in a row and you require a further extension, provide the officer what you can and request the officer another 30 days or 60 days and explain why you're asking that extension. What document are you waiting for? Have you applied for that document? Maybe it's a police clearance you're looking for or something like this. Demonstrate to the officer that you've taken necessary measures to obtain that document, but it's out of your control and you haven't been able to obtain it, hence why you're requesting the additional extension. And so long as you put it in that format, the officers usually grant you the extension. Now let's talk about misrepresentation. And this is important. Misrepresentation can be direct and can be indirect. Direct means intentional, means you knowingly did something to misrepresent the facts. And based on that misrepresentation, you may have obtained a visa in the past, or you're looking to obtain a visa today. An example of direct misrepresentation is, not mentioning a child in an application. You obviously know that you had that child and you excluded that child, and that could have been the determination of approval or refusal in that particular case. Another one is a criminality. You knew about a criminality, you know that mentioning this could complicate your case, and so you directly avoided saying yes to one of those questions where it asked you about your past criminal record. Indirect is where it might be unknowing. You might have made a mistake on one of the questions on the form, not knowing that this is a mistake. One of the most common examples is common law. In Canada, common law is 12 months of residing together in a conjugal relationship. Many countries do not recognize a common law relationship. They only recognize marriage. So you may have been residing with your partner under what Canada considers common law, but might have put in the application that you're single. And so the officer can charge you with indirect misrepresentation. Depending on the severity of the misrepresentation, you also have the obligation to prove that much more. So on an example like common law, might be relatively straightforward to prove to the officer that it's not recognized in your country, and that's one explanation. But what you really want to hone on is that misrepresentation did not factor in the outcome of your past application or your future application. So for example, if you've submitted a visitor visa application in the past, you checked off single, and now you're applying for PR, being single or being in a common law may affect the application because of the point system on the express entry, but it may not be a factor for a work visa, for example. My point is what you want to demonstrate is what is the misrepresentation, why did you not know about it, and did that misrepresentation actually change the outcome of your application? That's where you can win a misrepresentation or a procedural fairness application. It's what would have been the outcome had it been the reverse. If, for example, the outcome, so let's go with the criminality now, if you've submitted an application and you avoided informing the officer about this criminality, of course, a criminality makes you inadmissible to Canada, which means your future and your past applications most likely would have been denied unless you apply for an application called criminal rehabilitation, etc. So that's going to be much, much more difficult for you to prove. In that case, I would highly recommend that prior to submitting the procedural fairness explanation, to contact a representative, and perhaps the best course of action is to withdraw your case versus trying to further get into a mess, trying to further explain something that you really can't get out of. In that case, it might be best advisable to withdraw the case that you've submitted so that the officer doesn't indicate in his application reject it. When you withdraw a case, it ultimately means that you submitted something, it was withdrawn, no decision made, which means in your future application, you can be proactive and tell the officer that I've submitted this application, I avoided informing this because I didn't know this is the truth and this is what's going on with my application. When you do it like that, the officers are more inclined to work with you. One of the key things about misrepresentation is your character. Why did you avoid this information? And is there anything else, because you've ultimately directly misrepresented the case, is there anything else that you're not telling me? And so it goes towards the character. If an application is rejected, you're going to also have a difficult time if you decide to file for judicial review or appeal on the case, because the officers are rejecting it based on your direct misrepresentation and the fact that you knowingly knew this and continued to indulge in that misrepresentation despite receiving the procedural fairness letter. So it might be advisable to just withdraw the case and start from the beginning. But again, I advise you prior to making a decision of responding to the procedural fairness letter or withdrawing the case, speak to a representative, see if it's something that can be addressed, if there's case law that has been won in this particular matter, and then proceed accordingly. If you have any questions about procedural fairness, please let us know. Thank you, and until next time.